So what are we really talking about when we call things random acts of content? Now, a random act of content is when you create something, anything, to kind of magic a result out of thin air. So there is a fantastic by one of the MarketingProfs team. They said it's kind of like taking a handful of spaghetti and throwing it at the wall to see whether or not it's ready and whether it sticks to the wall. That's exactly what demand generation marketers tend to do with content. We get so panicked about the fact that we have to get our KPIs and we have to get stuff out there and we have to engage our audiences that we tend to create a lot of nonsense and a lot of fluff. And that is the random acts of content, where we're just creating something and doing something because we need to do something. But there is a good reason for that. It's not just because we're panicky, flighty animals at heart. No, demand generation can be really tough. Now, coming back to the definition of what demand generation actually is, demand generation is everything that you do to get and keep a customer. Everything that you do to get and keep a customer. People tend to think of demand generation as something that is just in that front end, something that is just that initial marketing piece, that lead generation, and then you hand stuff off to sales and Bob's your uncle, job's done, not an issue, not my problem anymore. That isn't actually the definition of demand generation. Demand generation looks at it from the front to the end and creates the campaigns, the structures, the content that helps you get that customer, convert that customer, and keep that customer for longer customer lifetime value. So when you look at that, the sales and marketing activities that you have to do as a demand generation marketer in order to make that happen are insane. You have to be able to generate interest and awareness. So you've got to be able to get people excited and get people interested in something. You've got to get them to sign up, and then you have to get them to nurture and engage. So you've got to create campaigns and structures and copy to do that. You have to qualify prospects. So you've got to get people from MQL all the way through to SQL, create all the content and fluff in between that. You also then have to leverage and help convert those customers. So we should be supporting sales in all of the activities that we're doing in the campaigns that we're building. On top of that, our job is also to retain customers for the long term, because marketing doesn't stop after the sales stop, right? Marketing continues well after the sales finishes. So we have to retain customers for the long term so we get that customer lifetime value and we understand the impact of our ROI. And added on an extra layer, we have to do all of the data, the optimization, and enhancing all of the funnels and the sales pipeline around that. So it's a hell of a lot of activities that the demand generation marketer has to do. And it's no wonder that we tend to create random acts of content. Everybody tends to get a little bit confused and a little bit panicked as we go through that process. So this causes a massive lack of focus. So lack of focus is the biggest thing that is going to be affecting your strategy. Now, the hundreds of businesses that I have worked with over the years are testament to exactly this. That lack of focus undermines your capability to achieve your goals, to reach your targets, and to actually be affecting your KPIs in a positive way. So we need to take a step away from that. And that is that random act of content. That's the nasty little weevil in the flower that we need to get rid of. So how do we defeat these random acts of content? How do we make something that is truly amazing, that allows us to be targeted, that allows us to be super strategic and actually get shit done? How do we do that? How do we be focused? And how do we also say no to the things that come up along the way that are going to distract us from our noble cause of reaching our KPIs? Effectively, that is where a framework comes in. So you need to be following a framework, and you need to be really strict with how you're going to implement that framework. So as we're going through everything today, I am going to be showing you only tried and tested things. The things that I'm going to discuss as I'm discussing this flywheel and going through all of this is stuff that we have put in place in our own business, in hundreds of other businesses across the planet. It is across B2B, B2C, and B2G, so business to government. These are tried and tested things. This isn't stuff that we're going, this is a great idea and a new trend you should try out for 2022 or 2023 or 2024. No, this is stuff that has worked in real life over the 10 years of experience that I've had building out these campaigns for hundreds of businesses. So the most important thing is to be following a process. And the process that we utilize is made of 3 component parts: behavior, content, and automation. You put those 3 things together and you can create some truly awesome demand generation that is highly effective. So behavior comes under 2 component parts. One is the psychology and understanding why people make the decisions that they make. right? So that is one component part. The other part of that is the actual physical behavior that people are displaying when they're going through your marketing materials, they're interacting with your content, and they're going through the sales process. Behavior is key to the process, and it forms the entire strategic foundation of what you should be doing. Building onto that, we have content. So you take that behavioral strategy and you imbue it into your content and you create something awesome, right? That is based around what your audience is actually interested in and wants to interact with. As people then go through that content and interact with it, that lifeblood of the whole process, in a modern world, we can't do without automation. We cannot implement a demand generation strategy in 2022 without a little bit of automation behind it. So automation is about leveraging that process and leveraging the strategic sort of advance that you get from behavior and putting that content overlay on it, and then actually making sure that you're getting it out there with the systems, with your marketing automation, with your stuff to make it happen. But this is a cyclic process. I didn't just choose the shape because it's pretty. It is very pretty, but it is a strategic and cyclic process. So as you understand behavior, as you then craft and create content, as you then automate things, you should be tracking that behavior and seeing how people interact with it and bringing people back into the loop and continually taking people around. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of each of these. And remember, these are all things that are working already. This is our methodology that we know is basically the path to success for your demand generation, and keeping it nice and streamlined as well. So getting into behavior. When you have behavioral understanding, this means you need to have a couple of different things in place. You need to understand a little bit of biopsychology. I don't mean that you need to have a degree in psychology in order to be able to do this, or you need to be a psychology specialist or a behavioral economist. I always get that wrong. But effectively, you need to have some core understanding of some very specific things around why the brain works in the way that it works. Now, I don't just do this because it's fun. Like, biopsychology is super fun. Like, I love it. Behavioral economics is amazing. But when you guys have real clarity as to how a few core component parts of the brain work, you understand then that no, that strategy over there is distraction. I'm not going to look at it. That tactic's not going to work for my audience because it's not going to help me do the thing that my audience's brains need to do. So the biopsychology and grasping onto that allows you to say no to a lot of stuff, which helps you with the focus. So there are a couple of things you need to know. Dual process theory is the most important thing for attention. Okay, so I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty behind these. Dual process theory in System 1 and System 2, we actually do cover that in the masterclass. So if you're a pro member, fantastic, you'll have access to the Demand Generation Masterclass. If you're not a pro member, I seriously could say that you should do one. My entire team are pro members. It's amazing. But the main premise in dual process theory is it is a theory for how we understand the world around us, right? So it's how we think, how we form judgments. And we utilize two different systems to help us think and form judgments. And dual process theory highlights why it's so important to understand what your audience is actually interested in, and why that piece of marketing advice of create products for the things that people want, not the things that they need and are looking for, is actually such amazing advice. So to kind of boil that down without getting into all the stuff behind it, effectively, when we are looking and paying attention to things, the brain has a very specific thing that it's looking for. And if it's not fine, if you don't fit in that specific thing that it's looking for, it's not going to pay attention to you. So as good as your marketing materials are, if you're not keying into what your audience is interested in the moment that they're interested in, they don't pay active attention to it, which you're not going to get eyeballs. You're going to get eyeballs, you're not going to get people into the funnels. So it's really important to have that first component part nailed down. This comes into awareness. So when I say awareness, I mean Eugene Schwartz's stages of awareness. So for the kind of more sort of nerdy people amongst us, so you want to go check that out, I'd suggest that you go and look at Eugene Schwartz's book, Breakthrough Advertising from the 1970s. He has some amazing stages that he says people go through in order to purchase. Now, I don't use his stuff because it's cool. It actually follows the general learning process that the brain goes through in order to encode and sort of withdraw information and recall information. It's just that, the general learning process is a bit boring and it's a bit dry, whereas the awareness stuff, because it's written by a marketer, is actually kind of fun, and it's a little bit easier to understand. So I utilize that process. But when you take the sort of core of dual process theory about the fact that something that we are interested in, or that the brain has been given an instruction to find information on, awareness becomes really important. And I'm not talking awareness, consideration, decision. I'm talking about individual awareness stages, which I'll take us through in a little moment. But if you can understand what at each stage of the process your audience wants to know specifically, or is a challenge for them, you can create content just for that. And that concept of awareness underpins all of the way that you should be creating content as a business, and how you should be filtering that into your demand generation strategy. So awareness, super important. And then layered on top of this is what we call the purchase formula. So the purchase formula is a fantastic bit of research done by Professor Brian Knudsen and his colleagues at Stanford University. And they figured out exactly the process that the brain goes through before it buys. Now, to boil that down to the core nugget that we need for this little list here, is that the brain assigns reward activation to your brand and your products and your services. And it is the amount of reward activation that it has when it sees you and your product and your service that determines whether or not it's going to buy. And that is in relation to some other things that the brain is up to. But that's the most important thing, the reward activation that the brain is getting. And the challenge we have in marketing is that everybody focuses on point of sale. They focus on trying to make sure that all the materials around point of sale are really kind of clued in and clear. And all the point of sale stuff is beautiful, but they neglect the rest of the journey. And unfortunately, the brain takes a long time to build its reward activation up. We have the least amount of control at the point of sale. We have lots of control in building a relationship beforehand. So we need to start earlier in the process. And everything comes down to being valuable in the moment for what that person is interested in. So you take dual process theory, awareness, and the purchase formula, and you smoosh them together. And what we get is that we need to be clear on what our audience actually wants to know. We need to know how to provide that in a way that isn't being filtered out. And we need to do that in advance so that we're increasing reward activation that the brain gets. When we do that, we are in marketing nirvana. And that is exactly what we're supposed to be doing the entire time. On top of that, so that's from a theoretical standpoint in terms of the strategy behind how you create your content plans, how you do this. And we'll get into that in a little bit as well. But that is your strategy. And then going down to the actual physical behavior, we need to be tracking behavioral intent. So we need to be tracking, what are people clicking on? What are they engaging with? How interacting stuff, and utilizing that to move people around our campaigns and to move people from MQL through to SQL and so on and so forth. So behavioral intent is really, really important to make sure that we have a demand generation strategy that's a little bit more fluid and a bit more adaptable to what the consumer actually needs, so that we're showing up when they're actually ready to buy. And that allows us to, all of this allows us to be valuable in the moment. If we are valuable in the moment to our consumers, we're increasing the reward activation in the brain, which means we have a higher likelihood of someone actually going through and converting. So I promised that I was going to show you awareness stages. Oh, I just scared my cat. He's sitting next to me on the desk here. I shouldn't clap. So I promised I'd take you through the awareness stages really briefly. So awareness, this is 100% the most important thing for us to base our demand generation content creation around, because of the way that the brain pays attention to the things that it cares about. Now, when we all start off with a problem or a challenge, most of the time we're unaware that we have an issue. And we might have symptoms of a problem, they might be niggling away, but in that unaware stage, we're not actively looking for information. So it's really hard to advertise to those people. Then you might have symptoms that you can talk to them about, but it's really hard to get in front of those people. But then there's a catalyst, something happens, something's changed. People become aware that they have a problem, that they have an issue, and they need a solution for it. When people become problem aware, this is a massive research point. Google calls this the zero moment of truth, the point at which we turn to the internet for information. We go off and we research a lot of stuff. Now, at that point in time, your audience really wants to know some very, very specific things. And you know what they are once you sit down and you work through that a little bit. Awareness of that problem is exactly what drives them to do research. They're not wanting to buy a product at that point, though. They want to understand their problem. As they understand their problem a little bit more, they move into being solution aware, where they want to learn about the solutions available. Again, not wanting to buy a product or service, but wanting to understand what the solutions are. So can they DIY it? Do they need to hire in a consultant, or do they need to outsource to somebody? Do they need to hire someone in-house? What are all the options that are available to them in the marketplace, and how can they go about solving it? They're not looking for specific companies at that point. It's trying to figure out, how do I solve this? Broad level. As they move through that broad level and learn more, they start to become product aware. So they start to create their own criteria for what's going to suit them, which is a super important point that we already want to be involved with. So when people become product aware, they then start niching down into, okay, I want to hire a consultant. How do I go about doing that? What are the best consultants? What different types of consultants are there? And they sort of create criteria and niche down into the information that they're looking for. And as they become more and more clear as to what they want, they'll start discriminating and rejecting things that don't fit their criteria, and they become most aware. Oh, that noise, my cat falling off the desk. That was very exciting. He just got so sleepy, he fell off the desk. Wow, it's like my baby fell off there. Bless him. He's a little bit confused now. All right, he's okay though, don't worry guys. Okay, then as we become most aware, again, our content consumption changes a little bit, and we start looking for information on specific products and companies, and that's when we want to talk to sales. But the rest of the time, we're not interested in speaking to sales. And the most important thing for us is that the types of content that people are interested in, what is valuable to them, change at each of these stages. So effectively, what I see businesses doing all the time is they create good quality content for problem aware, and they create good quality content for most aware or product aware, and they forget about the rest of the stages. Now, if you're going to build a relationship with people, you need to take them through all of the stages individually. You need to move them through the stages, build that relationship, increase the amount of reward activation. But it also means you have lots of different levels that people can come into your funnel from. So it's really important that you root your content creation around awareness, and it helps you be really strategic with your content. But it also lets you know, as people are interacting with that that's where they are in their journey. And that makes it far easier to discern where they are from MQL to SQL. So awareness is where it's at. So that covers behavior, getting really clear on what we need to do with awareness. And that is your one action. If you want to get rid of your random acts of content, focus on awareness and cater your content really, really strategically to help you understand where people are. All right, getting into number 2, the content itself. Now, 71% of B2B buyers will use content in some format to help them validate what they're purchasing. So content isn't just a nice to have, it is an extreme necessity. And yet when we see people go through the process, their content creation is really skewed, and they don't tend to create content for things that are actually useful to their audience. So how do we do that? What are the component parts that are important? So if we're going to create content for conversion, and we want to actually affect conversion in a really good way, the very first thing we need to do is create some behavioral content plans. So exactly as I mentioned, when you're thinking about awareness, you need to get really clear as to, okay, these are the awareness stages. My audience is going to be interested in these types of information at each stage. Therefore, what are the keywords that they're going to be searching for? What information is interesting to them? And create a beautiful content plan that is catered around that awareness, that transitions people, and you're preempting that next step. Then create some optimized lead magnets that cater for each of those stages. Here's a pro tip. If you're wanting to kind of make sure that you're getting the right kind of lead magnets, so you're not sure what kind of lead magnets you should be creating, effectively, you should have a lead magnet for each awareness stage. And the 2 types of lead magnets that we always try and encourage people to create are a good problem aware lead magnet and a really good buyer's guide. So a bottom of funnel, most aware lead magnet. So something for people to really sink their teeth into and to help them make a purchase decision. So it's a fantastic piece of collateral for sales. So you need to have a good quality content plan that is helping you understand what your audience is interested in, and also allows you to effectively segment people by interaction with that content. And then really good quality lead magnets. Try and have one for each awareness stage as a minimum. We like to make sure that businesses have between 6 and 10 different lead magnets. So one lead magnet isn't enough, and something that isn't catered to awareness and that isn't, what an audience member actually wants to read is not good enough as well. Then we need to, a question on what the 2 lead magnets were. So the lead magnets, you caught the second, not the first. The first is a top of funnel one, so like a problem aware one, focusing on explaining what the challenge is that your audience is going through at this point in time and how they can think about solving it. So you're basically transitioning them from problem aware to solution aware effectively. Okay, and then we need to create really good mapped nurture, because when someone is signing up for one of those beautiful awareness focused lead magnets that you're creating, don't dump them into the same nurture, or don't do the evil thing and not actually give people any nurture at all. You need to give people good quality nurture that is mapped to the exact awareness stage that they're actually at. So we need to make sure we're creating good quality nurture, and we're taking people from one awareness stage to the next awareness stage. So if they're problem aware, we're not selling to them straight away, we're taking them to the next awareness stage and transitioning. So we're always cascading them, and we're always preempting the next steps for them and providing somewhere to go. But also making sure that the content that we create is front to end. And what I mean by that is, you don't just create your nurture and your content right up at the beginning and create all of those lead magnets and then not create anything for sales and not create anything for onboarding. Because remember, our job is everything that we do to get and keep a customer. So we have to make sure that the process is consistent for everybody. And focusing on sales enablement. So not just handing stuff off to sales and being like, ta-da, job done, it's all over now. It's more going around, okay, yes, here's a little bit of sales collateral. Let's make sure that we're doing some sales motivational series. So sales motivational series are one of the best campaigns that you can do to help sales. It is bottom of funnel content that you are giving to your audience that is consistently talking about all of the things that they might need to actually help them make a purchase decision. This is fantastic for sales because it makes sure that you are creating contextual conversations rather than just creating conversations around, having sales pick up the phone and being like, are you ready to buy yet? You're actually getting them to do some contextual conversations because they've had something nice about pricing, they've had something nice about their objections, and you're helping sales create that engagement. And then always consistently focusing on providing that value in the moment as we go through the process. Now, I don't just want to tell you guys some nice things and be like, oh yeah, I believe her, she's real nice. I want you guys to dig deeper into it. So I've got a bit of a blind case study here, so I can't tell you who these people are, but I can tell you that it's a massive AI operations company, a global tech company that's focusing on lots of retail, financial markets, transportation, and government. What we did is we figured out what all of the various different awareness stages were for this company as people transition through this process, and help them sort of create behaviorally catered content to drive some of those results. And as a result of implementing that sort of awareness focused content, they had an increase, a 3x increase, 300% increase in sales qualified conversations that the sales team was then able to take on. So these aren't small numbers that this affects this by. These are big chunky numbers. Okay, now let's talk about automation, the third part in the process. So when you're automating your demand generation, obviously what we're really trying to do is we're trying to deliver like really good strategic nurture and engagement the whole way we're going through the process. That's what we're wanting to do. That is mostly our function, but we need to go deeper. We might be automating that, but we want to go deeper with that. We also need to be progressively profiling and segmenting our audience. So progressive profiling is when you track what people are interacting with and you learn a little bit more about them each time. So some progressive profiling, particularly in HubSpot, is referred to as just, filling out a form. And then once someone's filled out those form fields and you've already got that information, asking them for different information. So you're always learning more. That's great and fine, but tracking link clicks and tracking the content that people are interested in and segmenting them based on that actual behavioral interaction with your content is far more important for making sure you're getting people from MQL to SQL. The other thing that you definitely want to kind of go about is building sort of a core center of campaigns that is nurture focused. And I don't mean just that initial front end. I mean also for your sales and also, towards the back end of the journey when people have purchased, you're getting those repeat sales coming through. So making sure that you've got all of those core campaigns focused and that they're cascading, they're tracking onto one another. And then focusing on that behavioral intent all the time. So how do you track that engagement and let people, how do you go, okay, sales, this is the information we know that people consume these types of content. That means that this is sales intent behavior. And as people are consuming these types of content, we're going to flag that up to sales and sales is going to take that person on. And that allows us to be valuable in the moment all the time. And this is like so cheesy, right? The right message, right person, right time. It is the ultimate in cheese, as the message, as the poster message for marketing automation, but it's true. And when you combine content, behavior, and automation, you're able to get the right message to the right person in the right timing, because you're tracking what they're interested in. So another another little global tech company here, but this company creating specific software applications for training. They had a real difficulty identifying sales ready prospects. So we helped them do that with a little bit of behavioral intent, so that the system would automatically flag up sales ready behavior. And they really worked to understand what was valuable at each stage for their audience and provide that consistently. But we don't just want to sit back passively. And this is something I would really encourage everybody not to do. Don't sit back passively and just let people sort of interact with your content. Try and get them to interact with your content. So be proactively sending content out and really structuring for behavior. So we created engagement opportunities that they could interact with. So now they have a consistent flow of sales qualified leads. Their sales cycle is much shorter. Initially, when we opened the floodgates and put their database through the process, they doubled their closing rate, and we knew that wasn't going to be stable, but we're forecasting around a 20% long-term increase in conversion rate. So for that company, considering the turnover, that's huge. It was a really exciting project, but that's the type of results that you can be getting. Okay, so taking all of those three things together, that is your automation journey, and it's greater than the sum of its parts. So when you take a look at the automation journey, my advice for putting all of these things together is to identify your key campaigns that are really important to your business that you can get started with, and then prioritize for your goals. And then just execute to a realistic schedule. This is a thing we see people, it bites people in the bum all the time. The foundational campaigns that we always try and get people to focus on are, making sure you got good quality content and lead magnets, making sure that for every lead magnet you have exceptional nurture and follow-up, making sure that you have a really good quality welcome campaign, and you have a sales motivational series or a sales campaign in place for that. And that process that we take people through, just getting those things up and running, takes 6 months. So be realistic about your schedules. It takes time to get these things up and running. Okay, now I want to run you guys through this little flow here. This is the customer journey flow that we take all of our clients through. This is the money maker, guys. This is the thing that everybody should be taking screenshots of, or at least downloading the flow. So what we have here in the beginning is every good automation journey. And by the way, guys, this was created from a 5-year meta study that I did on all of our clients and all the people who were really succeeding with marketing automation when I wrote my book. To really understand from a behavioral element and from a real life actual people in the field doing this, what is working and what makes some people's sort of marketing automation demand generation so successful. So it's not just a pie in the sky theory. This is really actual businesses going through this, and this is the structure we take all businesses through. So everybody starts with really good quality content. I always split content up into basic and advanced for your top of funnel and bottom of funnel type of content. It's just to show that you should be taking people from one type of content to the next. Then you want to get people to opt in for some kind of a lead magnet. If it is the very first time that this person has been on your database, you want to pop them into a nice little welcome campaign. And then, obviously every lead magnet campaign should have its own nurture and follow up. Now, if it's then appropriate, so they're bottom of funnel and they're ready for it, you can pop them off to sales. And that's where you have your fantastic sales motivational series happening. And if they purchase, happy days, yeah. They're going to go off to fulfillment. You're going to get like a little bit of customer welcome, and you might have some upsells, cross-sells, downsells, new products, etc. But at the end of that process, that's where most journeys stop. If you really want to succeed with your demand generation, you've got to go further. When people fall out of this process, you need to have a long-term nurture that catches them. So that's for all of your customers. That's for all of the people who didn't convert. Everybody goes into the long-term nurture. What the long-term nurture is, it's all this amazing content you're creating in the beginning, but sent out to your existing database. It's value-add content and educational content. And what we want to do is we want to track engagement with that. And this is where we progressively profile, learn a little bit more about people, create a bit of a personalized feedback loop for them. And if their behavior shows us sales intent behavior, we drop them back into the sales process again. And that is how you take one lead and turn it into multiple sales opportunities. So that is the main premise behind the customer journey. But here's the real work for you guys. This is underpinned by lifecycle marketing. So we split it up into attract, engage, sell, and wow. And the job that I want you guys to do is every time we build customer journeys for clients, we take them through this process where we help them understand, right? Who's my target audience? How am I behaviorally targeting these people in terms of what awareness stage are they at and what content am I creating? How am I going to attract interest and create those juicy lead magnets that they're interested in? How do I then collect their leads? What automation am I using for that part of the process? Once we've got them through, how do I engage? How do I educate those leads? How do I add value? How do I track that behavioral intent to get them to the next part in the process? So really mapping out what you're doing for attracting, mapping out what you're doing for engaging. And then as we go into sales, what is that sales intent behavior that says to me that these are the people I should be offering something to? And how do we then close all of this up? So how do we create sales materials that help convert? And then as people go through, how do we wow? How do we deliver and how do we wow and give them an amazing experience? How do we onboard them and give that experience that we can offer more appropriately? And how do we collect those testimonials and referrals? And when you do that and get really clear for your own business how that works, you get to create something a bit like this. This is a customer's sort of automation journey. So it's taking the core concept of the previous, simple flow and turning it into something that allows you to see the whole process, going deeper with the sales pipeline and really getting into the nitty gritty. So really what we're doing is we're leveraging human behavior by understanding what people are interested in, particularly when it comes to awareness. Creating journeys based on that sort of world-class framework. So take that framework that I've given you guys and utilize it, split it out between attract, engage, sell, and wow, and identify what your campaigns are. And then execute that with data-led content. So be clear on the awareness stage and the types of content that people are going to interact with. So are you ready for your homework? Because I'm not going to let you go without making sure you're getting some homework done. So in order for your action points for today, I want you guys to focus on awareness and get really clear on those awareness stages. I can't stress that enough. I know I've said that word so many times. Focus on providing value in the moment. Identify behavioral intent. How will you know when someone is ready for sales? Make sure that you're automating your nurture. If you're starting out, that is the first place you should be starting, and always be focusing on increasing that reward activation and creating catered and intelligent content for each stage along the process. Okay, so those are your actions, everybody. That is what you need to do. And that is, I believe, us, boom, done. That is how you create fewer random acts of content and get really strategic with what you do. Thanks. Mic drop.
Man, mic drop, like cue the applause. Everybody at your desk sit there and clap. Kenda, that was absolutely amazing, mind blown. Attendees, now's the time. If you haven't asked your questions, which we do have some questions to get started. If you haven't asked your questions, ask away, get them in the chat pane, and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and just dive in, Kenda, into these. So Ken asks, what automation?
Can I sneak in there with one question first? Because I saw this one come up, and it was, is my cat okay? He is completely fine. He's actually managed to, while we were talking, sneak back across the top of the desk, and he's gone back to his spot. He was sleeping and he just fell off. So he's okay. I saw that come up in the chat. He's totally fine.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's happened to me though too. I've just been sitting here and no, I'm just kidding. That's never happened. All right. So Ken asks, what automation tools do you recommend?
That's a very difficult and mean question to ask. So there are over 8,000 marketing automation platforms out there. So it's a really difficult question to answer. I'm going to tell you which ones are the most common ones. That does not mean that it is the most best for you. So my advice would be to figure out, I always get people to do their customer journey first and their automation journey first, and to figure out what it is that they actually need to do. And then they can go to a marketing automation platform with the criteria of what they actually need, right? Rather than creating your automation journey to fit another criteria, someone else's criteria, right? It's not, it doesn't work that way. But the ones most commonly used, HubSpot, probably the most common, Eloqua, Marketo, not my favorites, but definitely ones that are out there and do stuff. Active Campaigns getting pretty good. I love Infusionsoft or Keep. That was how I originally came into the industry. That's one of the ones I used to use all the time. So there are so many different ones, but those are probably the 5 most common ones out there that you can have a look at. But the advice is very much do this planning first, then look at a platform.
Yeah, love it. Martina asks, for email nurture, do you have a recommendation for how many emails minimum should be created for each stage, or a process around that?
I love that question. So it all follows on from what the lead magnet is that someone has signed up for. So my kind of rule of thumb that I use for this is I like to take a look at the lead magnet, how many main points the lead magnet has got, because I want the emails that I'm following up with to be contextual and to have good quality information. So I'll look at how many points, that lead magnet has got, and I will make each one of those main points, the star of the email content for that email. And generally, so if you've got like three main points in your lead magnet, you're going to have your delivery email always. Then you're going to have your 3 main core emails, and then you have chance for a little bit of follow up afterwards. So I use that as a rule of thumb, but I don't like to go over 7 emails if I'm doing just a normal email nurture series off of the back of a lead magnet. It depends the type of nurture you're doing. So for sales motivational series, where you're doing sales nurture, I would take a look at how long your sales process is and try and send a bottom of funnel piece of content every 2 weeks over that sales process. And that could mean that you're creating 24 pieces of content, 24 emails for, a 24-week process effectively. So no, not a 24-week, a year's
math
process.
It's difficult. It's all well. All right. So yeah, moving on. Gladys asks, and I was like, hey, Gladys, great question. Can you expand on welcome campaigns just a little bit more for those that might not have them in place?
So I'm going to do a little bit of MarketingProfs promo because I can. So inside the masterclass, there is actually not only an explanation on welcome campaigns, but there are templates, my email templates for welcome campaigns. So the demand generation masterclass, you should really take a look at that because it's in there. But with welcome campaigns, you want to have 3 as a minimum emails. And your welcome campaign is a very difficult job to do. It's one of the hardest jobs to do in copywriting because you have to tell people about your company and your product and your service whilst talking about them. So that's really hard to do. So you have to teach them about who you are and why you believe in what you believe in and what makes you different whilst talking about who they are. So that's a really, really difficult job to do, but it's extremely important. And the brain really needs that because it needs it for context. It needs it for understanding why you are important and where you fit in the grand scheme of things. So the first email I always create that just is a thank you email, and it teaches people a little bit about the mission, but it sort of ties directly into what your audience really cares about. So that's the first email. The second email is always a little bit more about, why you did what you did, what those passions are that drives the company as a bigger company, and effectively how that means that you can help your customers in the best way possible. And then the third email, I like to focus on like showcasing, like the community and everything. And on all of those emails, you need to give people an idea of what they're going to expect with you and that kind of stuff. But remember, you're trying to build a little bit of a relationship with them in that. So that's generally how I tend to go with welcome campaigns. I hope that is expanding in the right way.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Martina asks, and this is, man, I feel we get this question in so many different ways with the different topics that we talk about here at MarketingProfs. But Martina says, if you have a small marketing team, any best practices for creating content for each stage when you're limited in resources and budget?
Crazy time. Yeah, I feel you on that. So effectively, we create a content plan, and what we like to do is we like to intersperse that content plan with all the various different stages. So we like to mix the content up a little bit, and we just focus on, you know, smashing out one blog post a week. For instance, one blog post a week, one lead magnet a month, maybe one email series a month. And so you basically just pick little things off. And so don't try and eat the whole elephant in one go, break it up into little pieces, set that priority order. But what I do is I'd look at all the awareness stages and I'd go, okay, I'm going to create that lead magnet, and I'm going to create the email series that goes around that. In terms of getting started with that, it can feel overwhelming. I actually get started bottom of funnel and I work up, because I always want to be able to drive someone to the next step. So if I'm starting bottom of funnel with like a buyer's guide, so like a bottom of funnel lead magnet and an email series that goes around that, I know that if I take a step up, I now have somewhere to send people that puts them into the sales process. So start from the bottom, move up, just try and pick off little bits at a time. It is a struggle. I feel you. At least you have a focus.
Yeah, love that. Great advice. Martin asks, any comments on the relationship or percentage of use between visuals and text in the messaging that you're delivering?
Technical question, very technical question. So imagery is really important. We obviously evolved to look at things around us and understand things around us. That gets through into the brain in a much better way. So imagery is really important. You definitely want to have imagery inside your emails, but you also want your emails to be accessible. So what I like to try and get people to think about with email is think about signal accessibility. So signal accessibility is when someone does not have signal or does not have Wi-Fi and their images are not displaying, what does your email look like? Your email still needs to be understood and the core content still needs to be there when images cannot be displayed. So that's how I like to break it up. I know that's probably not the answer that you wanted, but if you think about it from that way, it starts to make you think like, okay, well, I can't have that. I can't have too much imagery because I still need the text to be important. And the text is the thing that's doing the heavy lifting to build the relationship and it's adding the value. But you don't want too much text because you need to break it up with images. So try and think about it from signal accessibility instead of from you know, just a weighting percentage.
Yeah, I love that angle. We're going to try to squeeze two more. I know we're at time, people, but we're going to try to squeeze two more questions in here, and then we'll go ahead and cut this bad boy off for the day. By the way, the amount of fire emojis, claps, you're a great presenter. Like you should look at that chat pane a little bit. It's very good chat pane that's happening right there. But Pam asks, is there a specific, back to tools, by the way, is there a specific tool / platform that you'd recommend for behavioral based segmentation?
Yes. So I really like HubSpot for this. And I feel like a sellout saying it.
Yeah.
but I do like HubSpot for this because HubSpot allows you to effectively segment people into personas. So if you're clear on your personas, you know, then you can do it that way. I do feel like a sellout for saying that, but I like HubSpot for the behavioral elements. Sorry. Yeah.
No, don't be sorry. I love me some HubSpot. With that said, let's go with our last question. Deborah asks, what are your thoughts on using gated content throughout this process?
Yes, that's my thought. My thought is yes. You want people to sign up for something. So yes, definitely do it. I love me a bit of gated content. It just needs to be valuable. If it's valuable and you keyed into what your audience cares about, they're definitely going to sign up for it. My other thought on gated content is don't ask for too much. You don't need to know who their firstborn child is. It's not necessary, or where they had their first date or anything like that. That information is for the most part not necessary, and you can learn about that after the fact. Get them signed up. Always make sure you've got personalization pieces, so like name and their email address, and maybe a little bit of information if you need to disqualify people really quickly. But progressively get that information through the time. You don't have to, it's your first date with gated content. You don't have to get married straight away. They're not going to want to get married straight away. There
you go. Don't get married straight away. Hey, listen, Martina says it the best. This has been one of the best webinars I've attended in recent history in terms of actually learning something useful. Thank you. Thank you, Kenda, for the amazing presentation. By the way, attendees, as a quick